for each other. I want to be both. Two things can be true at once: humane immigration and border security, and I want to get it done.
So first of all, I'd like to thank you.
Did you say your name? So I don't know your name.
Yeah, my name's Nick.
Hey, Nick.
So I'd like to thank you for being involved in this. I think it's important to have an open democratic process. However, I have to admit some concern. Only a month ago, you came out for support for Medicare for all, something we now see on point of view signs here. Despite that, you still say that you have issues with getting rid of private insurance, something which is the backbone of Medicare for all. With that, in conjunction with the fact that your voting record is nearly unanimous with Joe Biden's stated positions, how can we trust that you're going to deliver on what you're promising? And how can we trust that you are going to win this and then be able to deliver?
Okay, well, let's start with Medicare for all. So, from the day, first off, I was the board chair of a health system, and I appreciate the question. I was the board chair of a health system in Minnesota. I really do understand the deficiencies in health care, which, by the way, we don't have health care. We have sick care. We have a system that only rewards hospitals for doing procedures. And then those procedures are all codes that have to be submitted to an insurance company, which can either approve them or deny them. How many in this room have had something denied by an insurance company? Yeah. See what I'm talking about? That's how this horrible system works right now. People getting surprise bills, 60% of all families in America right now because they never do that. And that's how this horrible system works. I've seen it firsthand from the delivery of care perspective. Now look at it. Medicare for all as a concept has been the means it exists. And I was one of the early supporters of a bill that allowed any state to do a waiver call through those. And the truth of the matter is, when I'm president, first off, we got to bring conservatives in. And I've done a common ground series in Minnesota where I'm not just an issue of the left. This is an American issue. The reason I'm doing it now is because I've spent 90 days here talking to people, listening to some of the worst horrifying stories I've ever heard. When I was in Minnesota, I represented a district that was quite prosperous in the suburbs where almost everybody had health care. Boy, what I've discovered because of all of you welcoming me here, because their Social Security benefits run out. Look, I'm a leader who tells you I do not have all the answers. I'm also a leader who will tell you that sometimes when I discover something new, I will change my mind. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind. Why do we demean people? Why do we hold politicians so accountable? Every American is covered. 25 million have no coverage at all. We allow, when I'm president, I will use every lever available to ensure that no pharma company in the world can sell their products in our country for 1 penny more than they do to Canada, Mexico, Spain, Germany, France, Australia, Japan. You get the idea? You know how much money that would save us? Because we pay 100% more than those countries right now? That will save us $250 billion a year. Then you add the health insurance profits. One of them, by the way, based in my district in Minnesota, United Health, that's about $300 billion a year. Since health insurance, since right now we spend $12,000 per person, every one of those 25 million people who lack coverage would literally get it with the money already in the system if we simply reallocate it. That's how I'm going to get it done. And I'll tell you, my conservative friends hear my proposition, the ones that I've worked with to make me the #2 most bipartisan member of Congress, rest assured, we might just surprise everybody. Because you know what? Their constituents are just as disappointed and disgusted by what's happening right now. Many of them in rural areas where they have no hospitals because they're closing. I make a promise to you. And by the way, there's a lot more in Middleborough over the coming weeks, months, and years. And if I discover information that changes my mind, I will let you know. And that's how I'm going to do it. And I would ask that you share your ideas with me. I love you guys. This is so cool. How about that? Yeah, all right. And just your name.
My name's Beth.
Hey, Beth, nice to see you.
I have a little concern that I'd like to elaborate on. I was getting some news feeds today, and I saw an article where the topic of no labels is discussed. You know, so obviously you're a Democratic candidate. If we should be a no labels candidate, then we would basically have 2 Democrats running to share that piece of the pie, and then this other guy over here on himself getting his piece of pie for himself. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question so I can clarify this. Let me tell you, she his opportunity to go to college that he couldn't afford from an ROTC scholarship. Went to Vietnam, was killed just 3 days after the moon landing in 1969. My mom was 24 and widowed. We had nowhere to live, so we stayed with my great-grandparents for 3 years. And then I got lucky. I got really lucky. My mom remarried, was adopted into a new family by a new dad, and I got so lucky that I've lived every day of my life since then, recognizing that it shouldn't take just a stroke of luck and being born in the right zip code to achieve success in the United States of America. It's a responsibility of people like me to pay it forward and to do better. And I got lucky, and I recognize that. And in 2016, I'm watching the election with my family in Minnesota. Remember that night? Yeah. I don't want to remember it either, but I'm telling you, if Joe Biden's at the top of the ticket, you're going to be remembering that sadly again this November. I mean this sincerely. I was watching that election. I had a wonderful life in Minnesota. I had a business I was trying to build. And I was so horrified by the outcome. Waking up the next morning to the sound of my daughter crying in her bedroom, 16 years old. She just overcome Hodgkin's lymphoma. She's a gay woman. I didn't know that at the time. And I saw fear in her eyes that I cannot even tell you how it jarred me. How it's so deeply affected me. And so immediately, I sat at the breakfast table that morning, and I promised my 2 daughters I would do something. All of you who are parents in this room, you know that feeling. You reach that moment where you have got to do something for your children and for all the children in this world. And I said, I'm going to run for Congress. And I flipped a district that had been red for 60 years. I beat a man who had won by 14 points that night. The only reason I did that is to resist Donald Trump. Okay? When I get to Congress, and I'm trapped in the House chamber on January 6th, one of 20 people up in the gallery, when most people on the floor got out, and we had to hide behind the seats, and we had to put on our gas masks, and the security, the couple of officers that were in there with us said, find anything you can to defend yourselves. You know what we could find? Pens and pencils. To be sitting with 20 colleagues in tears, many of them calling home and texting home to say goodbye to their families, to hear a few of them in prayer, was something I will never forget my whole life. I'm sitting there thinking that our president inspired that. And when we finally escaped, ran across the hall, saw all the rioters with faces down on the cold marble, with long guns from the officers pointed at them, when we heard the gunshot that killed Ashley Babbitt, when we ran down the hallway to the safe room across the street, I'm sitting in a small room with 20 of my colleagues, half Democrats, half Republicans, standing next to Liz Cheney, to whom I probably never said a word before. And we sat there and watched this screen for 2 hours or so, waiting for our president to quickly do something. And he didn't. And when he finally came on the screen, Liz Cheney explained, it's because of him and we're going to hold him accountable. I share this with you because that was the only time in my service in the United States Congress that Democrats and Republicans with whom I was gathered all felt like Americans. We all applauded, we hugged each other, and we resolved to get back in that chamber that night to do something because of that man. I also had one other thing that happened that night. When the doors slammed, the alarms went on, and we had our masks on, my first reaction was to my colleagues, my Democratic colleagues, to join me. Let's go to the other side, the Republican side, so we could blend in. We all believed that they were coming for us, the Democrats, and that if we could simply go to the other side of the chamber where the Republican side was, that we'd blend in and they would mistake us for Republicans. And I looked at my colleagues, a few of whom were in dismay because they were members of color and they could not blend in. And January 6th means a lot to all of us because it was one of the worst days in our country's history, especially for those of you watching on TV and not believing what was happening. For me, it had another meaning. It was a day where I really discovered privilege in a way I never or would have but for that moment. My colleagues are probably wondering if they should keep this little pin on so Capitol Police could make sure they knew that they were a member of Congress. But if they left them on, the rioters would know that they are members of Congress. So I'm telling you this because that day was so destructive, but also so illuminating to me. And our president, Donald Trump at that time, inspired that horrible day. Hundreds of people are now sitting in jail or prison, and he's not. They followed their president, they believed in their president, and he walks the streets, and he right now is beating Joe Biden. So for anyone who says I would do something to help this man get back to the White House, you either do not know me or do not know my story or do not know who I am. I would not be standing before you dedicating my whole life, my time, my treasure, everything I got to defeating this horrible, horrible human being. So, to the root of your question, no labels. I am a Democrat. I've been a Democrat my whole life since my grandma, Dear Abby, anointed me one at dinner in downtown Minneapolis in 1980. I have invested in this party. I have supported candidates. I've had President Biden to my home for fundraisers. I have done everything humanly possible to ensure that we become a country that treats everybody equally like our Constitution promises. I promise you I will continue to do that. The reason I'm running as the only Democrat willing to say the quiet part out loud is because I see Donald Trump coming back to the White House, because Joe Biden should not have run for president again. And nobody had the courage to do what's necessary. I mark my words. I will do nothing to help that man. No labels, whether you love them or hate them. Let me just make a simple proposition to you. If, for some reason, we don't succeed and I become the nominee, and it is Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, Trump is going to win. And the only thing left, the only chance left that we have is a group like No Labels who could put someone at the top of the ticket who could draw votes from Donald Trump. I will not be that person because I will not draw votes from Donald Trump. Nobody like me. Joe Manchin, no Larry Hogan, no John Huntsman, no Nikki Haley, no reasonable, moderate, center-right, center-left person could ever be that person. The only people that could do it are someone like Ron DeSantis, right? Vivek Ramaswamy. It's not a joke. These are people who would draw votes from Trump. Do not demean a No Labels group that is waiting to see what happens and is maybe the very last bastion to save us. But you know who's orchestrating this nonsense? The Democratic National Committee. It is organized, it is intentional, because they are so, it is a cult of personality around Joe Biden, everybody, that is so destructive. It is the same thing going on with Donald Trump. I will not be the No Labels candidate. There is no scenario where that would make any sense. I will not be on a ticket with Ramaswamy or DeSantis, for God's sakes. But I'm going to tell you that we should keep our hearts and minds open to what could be the very last possibility to defeat him. Because I am convinced that Joe Biden cannot. So that's as clear and forthright and honest as I can possibly be. I'm a Democrat, as I hope all of you will do, to protect this country in the absence of people in Congress right now unwilling to do their jobs. We gotta let's get people in the back too.
Hi, Mr. Phillips. My name is Chris.
Call me Dean, Chris.
Now, I'm new to Team Dean, and Open Secrets reports that you receive $0 in PAC funding. While I firmly stand behind PAC funding in our elections, I wouldn't be able to blame you if you did start accepting that because you're a grassroots candidate and you need to create a platform. Do you have a plan for campaign finance reform in light of cases like Citizens United?
Yes, good question. You know, what makes me rather unique is that I'm the only one out of 535 members of Congress who don't just take PAC money. By the way, no PAC money, no corporate or otherwise. I don't take lobbyist money. I don't give money to fellow members of Congress or accept it from them because that's just money laundering. And fifth, I don't have a leadership PAC, which is a really disgusting slush fund for politicians. I'm the only one out of 535 people that can say that to you, and it's true. My colleagues are spending, colleagues, people in Congress are spending $10,000 per week raising money, every single week collectively. It's hard to find someone to go to dinner with on Wednesday night in Washington because they're all going to PAC events and I have nothing to do. That's sad. Come on, I get to catch up on Netflix now. But here's the thing, everybody, and this is the root of why we're in this position. Every Democrat and Republican is spending all this time raising money. Who do they raise it from? The wealthy and the well-connected. They're going to country clubs and steakhouses and corporate boardrooms, gathering in luxury surroundings, collecting their PAC checks, their lobbyist checks. Not only that, my friends, we have legalized corruption to a point where members of Congress can take that $5,000 check and then sit the next day in their seats on a committee with the person who gave the money in the audience, staring them in the eye when they're actually making legislation to regulate their industry. How freaking sickening is that? Yeah, so my proposition is this: we need a constitutional amendment relative to campaign finance. Citizens United was a horrifying decision. The sad truth is, every campaign in this country, congressional and now certainly presidential, almost outsources its marketing to super PACs. I'm not going to enter a fight with one hand tied behind my back. If a super PAC starts that is ostensibly there to support the effort of this campaign, I can't coordinate with them. I can't know what they're doing. I never will. But I'm not going to enter this as someone who cannot compete. Joe Biden is the biggest recipient of PAC money, I think, in history. He's got more billionaires supporting his campaign than I ever would. So let's be honest, everybody. This is BS. And I think we got to expose the truth. I think we need to shine light on it and be transparent and let everybody know it's the reason we have Trumpism is because all of my colleagues are spending time with the wealthy and well-connected. And everybody I saw online last night at that Trump rally, they're just angry. They're not being heard. They're not being seen. They're not being appreciated. They're not being approached. They're not even having a chance to get a word in. And people get into Washington, they get sucked up by it. Why do you think people sit there for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Why do you think people who are otherwise principled stick around too long? Like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, like Dianne Feinstein, like Mitch, well, I'm not going to say he's a, how about Joe Biden? 50 years. You get caught up in this and you lose sight of what's really going on. That's why this has been the most amazing experience of my life. So help me do this. Let's get the money out of politics. Let's return to the days when Ronald Reagan won the presidency with public dollars because he didn't have to shill and could raise money and be a grifter and beg. That's not what presidents should do. It's embarrassing. That's why I want all of you to help me. $5, $10, right? That's the more meaningful investment in this campaign than anything you could imagine. That's why I start my days calling the $5 and $10 donors because those are the best calls of my whole day. They pick up the phone, like, this is Dean Phillips, I want to say thank you. And there's always silence. And then they ask if this is a bot. And then I have to give them my mother's maiden name and my birthday. But this happens all the time because you know why? They don't even think this is real, that someone could call them just to say thank you. So thanks for asking the question, Chris. To all of you who care about this, just help me expose the truth of why we're in this predicament, reduce the need for money, do it like other countries who are seemingly doing it better than we, with shorter campaigns, caps on what can be spent, and end this nonsensical way of financing campaigns that is as destructive to democracy as anything you could imagine. Oh. You're live.
Hey, my name's Walter.
Hey, Walter.
How you doing? I checked out your website on climate change, since that's the single most important issue, and frankly, anyone here is under 50 for whom it isn't, it's better read a little more. But so I was very happy to see that you support carbon pricing,
Yes.
which is the single most effective policy.
Yes.
The IPCC report mentions carbon pricing over 400 times in the latest report on how to actually cut emissions. And even more, even better, you support carbon fee and dividend, which is the fairest and most efficient way to do it. And it's also the one that might actually get some people on the other side of the aisle to do it, because it doesn't have the government keep the revenues from the carbon fee, which will be a lot of money over time, but instead pays it back to American households. And if you live in a small apartment in Manchester and you take city buses, you're going to get back a lot more than you put in. If you have a Learjet and fly to the coast every weekend, you're going to be paying in a lot more. And so a lot of people, progressives, are kind of against the market. They think that's what's caused the problem, but it's really the failure to address this market failure that's caused climate change. And it's not just the United States, it's China, Iran, any country, whatever. So really glad. I wish you'd talk about it more. And but keep in mind that the people on the other side, the Trump pretends it doesn't exist. I don't really think he believes that.
Yeah.
And Nikki Haley says the market will solve it. Well, the market cannot solve a market failure. The market failure being, of course, when I fill up my car with gas, I'm happy. ExxonMobil's happy. But anyone in this room, people are going to be around 200-300 years from now.
So can I get, it's a wonderful, do you have a question in there too? Or
Well, why don't you talk about it more often?
Thank you. And by the way, thank you for giving the most brief and succinct, no, seriously, the best explanation of what we need to do that I've heard from anybody in Congress. I'm here. You guys, This is the live free or die state. This is not a country that takes well to mandates. We like incentives or disincentives, and that's what carbon fee and dividend is. We put a disincentive on the use of fossil fuels. And by the way, if we're a country that is so reliant on fossil fuels, that is one of the worst national security failures you could possibly imagine. We are enriching Iran, we are enriching Russia, we're enriching the Saudis right now. And you know, we didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of rocks. We came up with better ways to do things. We know what they are. You know, we have incentive programs. Wind is the least expensive form of electricity generation. So guys, this is not that hard. And by the way, I want to celebrate John Curtis, my Republican colleague from Utah, the chair of the Republican Climate Caucus in the House. Benji Backer, a young Republican who has made his life mission the education and inspiration of young conservatives to actually get on board with this before it's too late. I'm going to keep bringing a lot of this back to the simple truth that Donald Trump is going to march right back to that White House if Joe Biden's at the top of the ticket. So when you all leave here tonight, do me a favor, please call 10 people before tomorrow and encourage them to give me a chance. Because I will do this because I know how to work with the conservatives that actually invented that very proposition. And you're right, progressives better get on board because the market needs a disincentive and incentive to moderate itself. That's the only solution. And we also have to embed it in our foreign policy. And if we are going to enrich countries all around the world with hundreds of billions of dollars of our largesse, do you not think that we should have some standards for climate action for those dollars that we share with other countries? I think we should. It's the only thing we're going to do to provide an incentive to them to help us preserve the future. By the way, let's call it pollution. Republicans don't like pollution. Democrats don't like pollution. Earth is going to survive. The question is, will the human race? Let's do something to ensure it does, and let's not turn it over to men in their 80s who will not even be around to see that future, but to a generation that will be living it.
You said that you won't be seeking re-election.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You said that you won't be able to secure the nomination.
I'm going to help one of you run for Congress, run for city council, run for school board. I'm serious, everybody. We are. It could go on for 8, but I'm here to give you the oath that I will not go on as long as some of the people I've mentioned before. But I don't think that's in this country's best interest. I think we need term limits. In fact, 18 years in the House and Senate and 18 years on the Supreme Court. For 2 reasons, because we need independent-minded thinkers, and we need to clear some space so people from your generation can participate. Every one of these people I've talked about, even good people, they have prevented sometimes 3 generations of leaders from even having a chance to run for office because they just think it's so important for them to stick around. It's wrong. I'm going to help in some way or another, but I think something's telling me we might be doing this for at least 4 years. That's my obligation. All right, in the back.
This is our last question.
That means we have one more. Hey, Conrad, that means we have this little shtick, you see. He plays bad cop, I play good cop. We have 2 questions.
So, hi, my name is Roy.
Hey, Roy.
I was town captain for Barack Obama in
Oh, wow.
2008, and it was great experience.
Hey,
I've been
thank you.
involved for a very long time. First day of Congress, Mitch McConnell promised to make him a one-term president, right? And that's the way Congress has behaved for the last 16 years. It's purely oppositional, getting very little done. We have a college football coach preventing hundreds of military appointments. How does that change whether you are in the Congress or president?
Great question, and I'll answer it in a way that I don't think any politician who spent their life doing it could ever answer, because they are brought up in a culture in which there is only one strategy: to defeat the other side every 2 years. They get so caught up in that they completely lose sight about actually solving problems. So when a few of us come to the Congress, like me, who come from a business background, a background which I've never succeeded by demeaning 50% of my customers before, you see. I've only succeeded by extending invitation, getting to know them, understanding what matters. If you could see my cell phone right now and see how many of my Republican colleagues have sent me beautiful notes of support in the last number of weeks, just saying, you know what, thanks for the courage, miss you, man, you know, hope it's going well, They're being tough on you. You know, I'm saying this because we are a human enterprise, just like we are a room full of humans. I lead differently than any president in recent memory because I do not come at this with a political lens. I'm going to tell you a story in just a moment that will very much illuminate how I intend to lead. Now, granted, politicians make promises all the time. Here's what I'm going to do. Well, I'm telling you, I'm coming from the place that makes it impossible to do right now. Not because there's a system preventing it, but because there are leaders preventing it. And some of the people that have texted me in the last number of weeks would actually really surprise you. Some of them, I think, are actually kind of pulling for me. They don't want Donald Trump. Now, in front of the cameras, they say they do. They actually want to solve problems. They are desperate to help their constituents. And I think we can do something really different here if you give me a chance. So we know what the status quo can be, but are you ready for a little bit of courage to think about what the future could be? And I can't make the promise we can achieve all these things, but I can make the promise I am sure as heck gonna try. I'm gonna have people there at the takeoff, so they'll be there at the landing. That's how I'm gonna lead. I'm gonna tell you the truth, and I'm gonna make it count, and I'm not ever, ever going to stop trying to get work done, and I will expose those who are standing in the way, and believe me, I'm gonna do it with love. And that's the difference between vinegar and honey, and watch me try. I'm telling you, it's gonna work. All right, one more question in the back, and then I'm gonna tell you a story, and then I'm gonna ask a favor of all of you.
Good evening, Mr. Phillips.
Hey.
Got it.
Call me Dean.
Okay, sorry. Good evening, Dean. My name is Vic Mahindru.
Hey,
I'm
Vic.
from Manchester West High School.
Hey.
And this may not be a hot topic right now, but the obesity rate in the US is soaring, with major companies branding chemicals and preservatives as healthy for our children, landing to diseases such as prediabetes, which I was diagnosed as in my sophomore year. How do you intend to address and combat this issue as President of the United States?
Great. First of all, thank you for the question. I'll tell you, we have something called the Farm Bill. We do it every 5 years, and it is the root, no pun intended, of everything that could be so great in this country and also so terrible. Because all it is billions and billions of dollars of incentives for farmers. So what happens if you give farmers incentives only to grow corn, for example, they grow a bunch of corn, it's subsidized, then all of the big food companies, they want to use the least expensive food ingredients that they possibly can. So corn, it makes corn syrup, it's an artificial syrup, it's a sweetener, right? They're using ingredients that are subsidized that for the most part are not good for us. So the answer to the question is, let's get real. We should be investing in American health. You know that our life expectancy is declining in this country? Obesity rates are rising, diseases of despair climbing, opioid addiction rampant, and we don't have a mental health system or emotional health system. We don't look at addiction as a health issue, we look at it as a criminal issue, and we subsidize the very terrible ingredients that are making people ill. I'm different. I don't care what the politics say, I don't care what the parties say. Let's follow the facts, follow the data, reform the Farm Bill to give incentives to farmers to grow food that actually keep people healthier, right? Fitter, and live more wonderful lives. And that's what we should be doing. And then we gotta make sure that those things are available in every community in this country, rural areas, urban areas, suburban areas, right? I hope that's where you're leading me, right?
Exactly.
Good, well, thank you. I didn't even know your question or answer, but that's exactly what we gotta do. And nobody's telling you the truth. You know why this happens on the Farm Bill? It's the same thing as pharma. I'm gonna close with this and we're gonna tell you a story. The reason that we pay 100% more than any country in the world for our pharmaceuticals is we allow the pharma industry to bring $300 million a year to Washington, share it with their lobbying team, and then put all that money in the pockets of candidates. Saying something really simple, just maintain the status quo, that's all we're asking. Well, that's what we do. Why would members of Congress ever allow them to do that to us, knowing that it costs all of us $250 billion a year? Think about the nonsense. What happens in the Farm Bill? Same thing. Lobbyists get their money in the pockets of the Ag Committee members, and they lead them down a path that benefits many of these huge corporations that want to maintain the status quo. So back to your question, Chris, to so many of the others, I'm going to tell you the truth. It does not make me popular, but that's not what matters. Because as long as I got all of you to help me out, they can't do anything about it when I'm in that White House and I tell the truth and I expose them for what they're doing, and no longer can they do that to me or to this Congress? Because we will know what's really happening. That's how I'm going to lead you all. So let me end with this. I do this series at home called Common Ground, you see, because I have this belief, and like what I did last night with those Trumpers waiting in line in the cold going to the Trump rally, that if you simply go up to somebody and look them in the eye and shake their hand, maybe even give them a hug or a high five, that a lot can change. So I do something where we gather 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans at a table, and it's facilitated by a group called Braver Angels. You all know them? Any of you? Look them up. They're amazing. Democrats and Republicans from all around the country, simply getting people together. So we talk about our backgrounds, we talk about healthcare, immigration, and national division. And at the end of these gatherings, after some food, we should take 30 seconds and go around the table and share what we got from this experience. Not long ago, we had this wonderful moment where a young woman named Emily looks across the table at Dave. Says, Dave, when you pulled up next to me in the parking lot in your F-150 with the Trump sticker, I almost got back in my car, left the parking lot, and went home. I could barely get myself to come in the building, let alone sit at the table with you. And then she smiled and says, you know what though, Dave? I've never sat with a Trumper, and I kind of like you. And Dave smiles, goes around the table, gets to Dave. He looks at Emily, says, Emily, when you drove up in your Prius, I wanted to run it over. And he says, but I'm glad I didn't, because I've never sat with a liberal before, and I had no idea how much common ground we had. And at that moment, the dyed-in-the-wool Trumper, the bleeding heart liberal, on their own accord, they stood up in front of our table and they hugged, they embraced. And I gotta tell you, like I said earlier, I don't know if this comes to an end in November, my whole career in public service, or goes 4 or 8 years. But either way, I achieved the very success that I started out on the very first day I decided to run for Congress, to demonstrate that we can do it. So when I'm your president, by the way, my birthday is January 20th, and that happens to be Inauguration Day. That would be a heck of a gift. And I promise you, people say all the time, so what will you do on the first day in the White House? Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to plan my first Common Ground dinner, where we bring Democrats and Republicans from all around the country to sit in the White House, not in tuxedos, in jeans, hanging out with their president, me, getting to know each other, telling a little about ourselves, and having a little convo. Because I intend to lead that way. And you know, everybody that does that, they're going to go back home to Topeka, right, or Boise, or New York City or San Francisco, and maybe do the same thing. Get a few people around the table, and we're going to start repairing this country one handshake, one high five, and one hug at a time. And that's my request to all of you. You ready for change? Yeah. You ready for a president who's not going to demean half of this country or ignore the other half? I might be your guy, but here's my request. There are enough of you in this room tonight that if you all go home and send either 10 people a note, post something on Facebook, Instagram. For some of you older folks in the room, there's this thing called TikTok or Snapchat. You know what I'm talking about. If you do that, and tomorrow night we shock the world in some way, shape, or form, you will have participated in the greatest act of American patriotism that this country may have ever known. Because nobody believes we can do it. Most of the polls say we're only at 7%. Let me tell you, I'm going to give you a little in on a secret. We're going to do better than that. Under promise, over deliver. That's my request of all of you. And then, this is just going to begin. And then I want you to join me somewhere else. Come along on the road. Get to know this amazing country. Get to know the people I'm meeting. And let's help do this together. Because when I'm in the White House, you are my family, and I hope I'm part of yours. I love you, Manchester. I love you, New Hampshire. I love you, Granite State. And my goodness, my friends, let's shock the world tomorrow night. Let's do it. Change is coming.